All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Adrenal Fatigue podcast. I'm here with my lovely co-pilot, Angela Rocchio, today, and we're going to have a powerful conversation today, one that we haven't really dove into on this podcast before. So we're really excited and looking forward to kind of just shining a light on this area that a lot of people who struggle with hormonal imbalances, chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, burnout, can often really relate to, and that is being an empath. So before we get into that, I just want to quickly let you know a little bit more about Angela. Angela is the co-founder here at the Adrenal Recovery Collective. She's a certified health coach and a meditation and yoga teacher, and she's amazing at what she does. We just love her so much here. And Angela is also an energy healer, which to some of you might sound kind of new. So before we just dive into the topic, Angela, do you want to just take a quick second to share a little bit about what energy healing is and what that looks like?
Sure. So the modality that I use in my energy work is called access bars, and it's a form of basically 32 points in the head that all connect with various aspects of our lives, like money and creativity and sexuality and healing. And often these areas of our lives, we get stuck in various areas of our lives. We have points of view about all of them. And when you place the 32 points, or when you place your hands on the 32 points as a practitioner, you can help someone start to release some of these conclusions and points of view around what they have, so you can help them live a life with a little bit more ease and have more ease in these areas, whether it be money, sexuality, body, and so on. So that's a really fun thing to be a part of. I love doing that work with people when I am not, working remotely with people. It really does require being present with people, putting their hands on those points. But it's pretty magical work. It's been very profound in my own life and my own healing. So.
Yeah, I think it's so incredible. Then the energetic side of recoveries is so interesting, and just the profound results that even our clients get, but anybody can get when they kind of start exploring their body and where those imbalances are in a really holistic way. That's so powerful. And so speaking of energy, I think that being an empath is something that can be very draining because you can be soaking in a lot. So let's talk about that. And maybe let's start right at the beginning with what is an empath?
Yeah. So an empath is someone who is going to feel more empathy than an average person would. And that can be taking on other people's emotions, but I also believe not only the emotions, but their thoughts and their feelings. And these are people that we tend to give the phrase of highly sensitive, which is a great way to describe it. I also feel like that description, though, sometimes the word sensitive in our culture is looked as a weakness, and it's definitely not a weakness. And an empath often has a lot of emotional intelligence, and these people also tend to be, and I'll kind of go down this path that we'll kind of get there even deeper, but someone that's an empath is very much aware of other people's and can sense other people's emotions. So when you walk into a room, if you're an empath, you're not necessarily worried so much about what's happening in the room, but you're more focused on what's happening energetically, or, in that feeling and sensing. You're really good at sensing things, even without somebody having a grim look on their face. You're going to maybe pick up on some of their emotions and what they're feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And what's coming to my mind is is it that feeling if you walk in the kitchen and there's a family member in there, or you're at the office and you walk into a room and it's your boss or somebody's there and they haven't even turned around yet, but you can feel that they're in a mood?
Totally.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah. That's
okay.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So some people feel this a lot more than others.
I feel like people have different levels of this for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So how do people know if they might be an empath? Is there any traits that are kind of common that stand out?
Yeah. So and I know myself because I am an empath myself. And so I can come to this also from a very, personal place as well. These are people that often have a hard time having boundaries for themselves. And they're people that often leave a situation or a conversation with like lots of lamenting afterwards, lots of processing afterwards, and they kind of feel other people's stuff in their worlds. And their stuff becomes kind of ours, if that makes sense. And often we can be people pleasers, and sometimes it often comes with this whole like a little bit being the victim and the victim mentality. So you can start to see just by the things that I'm bringing up that this is an important topic to talk about, especially because I see so many of our adrenal recovery clients, working through this and being empaths, that's why I want to bring this connection of like why this is important and why we're talking about it with our community is that when you don't have boundaries, right? When you bring other people's emotions and their thoughts and their feelings in yours, you kind of almost lose yourself in a way. And it can also be very, it can create a lot of anxiety for oneself. And so in your life, it can create a lot of anxiety. So that's where, we kind of what can lead to this, fatigue and anxiety, in this overactive nervous system, kind of always being in this idea of being threatened or feared by what's going on around you. And, that's sort of where I am passionate about, because if you're not clear, if you don't know if you're an empath, or maybe you're an empath, but you don't know how to use it to your advantage, because let me tell you, it is very much a superpower, which I'll talk about for sure, is that if you don't know how to use it to your advantage, it can definitely bring you down. It can definitely lead to burnout. And I've seen it time and time again, and even in my own life.
This is interesting. And I could see how a lot of people probably operate without really any awareness of this, though they probably feel a lot of those feelings and just kind of like process them in their day to day, but live with that anxiety or live with those, I should say, without those boundaries, which is just like a chronic stress to yourself, right? Which brings us to, I think, like a great kind of tie-in to how this relates to burnout and adrenal fatigue, like more specifically.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just want to reflect on what you just mentioned too, just to kind of elaborate, is this idea too that when we pick up on other people's emotions and what they're feeling, even the judgments of us. So a lot of times empaths are really conscious of what other people think of them, right? And worried about what other people think of them. And what this also leads to is us not being our authentic selves and really having to work hard at noticing like what's ours and what's other people's. And so, like I mentioned, those boundaries are so important, because when we're not being ourselves, and we're allowing others to sort of drain us, there's a lot of ways that can lead to this sense of like not knowing ourselves, not being comfortable in our own skin, and just the more subtle aspects of fatigue that people don't really see, but I want to help to make that connection, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just kind of coming up for me, thinking about some of the sessions I've had with clients, and just like with the history of work that we do in the Adrenal Recovery Collective, is I find that when people are kind of living this way, it's easy to create like a lot of chaos in your life. Like you're worried about what everyone's thinking. You don't have great boundaries. You're feeling a lot of things, but also worried, just kind of like processing all this stuff all the time, and easily, like you said, easy to be in that victim mode. Mm-hmm. So you can see how this could just be a recipe for disaster for your nervous system.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And really keep you stuck like in headspace that's not conducive, right? 100%. Conducive of recovery
and really just being able to regulate the nervous system and just have peace in your world, be calm when you're constantly worried, and you're worried about what people are thinking of you and all of this. Yeah, so being highly aware too is such an amazing gift. And I feel that I just want to shed light on this idea too, that we are very much energetic beings, right? That's science. And so I like to think of us as like radio receivers. And so we're all pretty intuitive beings, although a lot of that has been, I feel like our intuition has been dulled. We don't really, even if you're not an empath, like people have, decided that doctors know more about their bodies than they do, that we have to rely on outside sources to tell us what we know about ourselves. And so that's another thing that I just want to share with with our listeners, to that we are these really, gosh, we have a strong sense of knowing, and we're able to perceive so much from our environment, but yet we don't always trust ourselves and trust those gut feelings that come up. And especially empaths, I feel like, we're always like, oh, we have this big awareness and it is a superpower, but if we don't trust it, if we don't believe it, and we don't know how to use it, that's when it can really, lead to our, it can lead to, a lot of times just to, like you said, chronic disease, chronic illness, chronic anxiety. And that's what I like to help people navigate today, and shift that energy, shift this energy that you have, this ability, or what I'd say a superpower, and using it to your advantage.
I love that so much. And I think that this is just absolutely huge. And I think kind of what I'm taking away from this is that it really starts with awareness, because it's like a beast kind of, I don't want to call it a beast because I like that you're calling it a superpower, but it can be this like almost like a beast running wild that you have just not harnessed you can harness in a positive way, but you need to have the awareness that that's something that you need to step into and to start harnessing.
Absolutely. Right? Yes, it can easily go both ways. So that's exactly what I want to make people understand, is that if I could give like the best advice is like, if you do feel like you're an empath, or you already know you're an empath, like get connected, start learning about what this is, right? Start understanding how you can thrive, how you can learn more about yourself. And you most likely will look back on your life, and when you start to see like that you are an empath, or start to understand what this is just a little taster today, but when you start opening up the doors, you will probably look back at your life and a lot will make sense. And you might be already having a lot of ahas as we're talking here. And so that's the best advice, is like open yourself up to this idea that that you are like, and I hate to say it because I don't even want to like, but it's this idea of people being really aware, highly sensitive. It's almost like being psychic almost, right? But again, we dull those capacities because, and a lot of times in the world, it's not really valued, or actually not even, it's not the word valued. It's actually it's not recognized as much. And even that idea of this as a sensitive person, right? We look at it as a weakness, and we don't necessarily value this ability in people.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is help people feel empowered, actually, to be able to start to play with because the most important thing for an empath is the inner dialogue, their mindset, super, super important. It can either make it or break it when it comes to your well-being, your happiness, your health. That's how serious this can be.
And this might be like something we can dive into on another day, but I'd be so curious to kind of dig more into the connection with empaths who have experienced trauma, or empaths struggling with addiction, and like the connection there. I can think of a couple clients that I've worked with who have been in like really negative places and kind of struggling with past traumas and addiction and all these things. And you can see how some of these tendencies that empaths tend to have can keep that cycle and that mindset, like one that is really negative and hard to step out of. And something that always comes up to me when comes up for me working with these clients, and just like, even to those out there listening who are resonating with being an empath, it's like, step into your power. Like, you have so much power here, and you can step into this and harness it in a way that could feel so much better for you, and that you don't have to carry this so heavily in your life, like the way that you have. And as you mentioned, it's just something that can just hold us back when it comes to our recovery. So I think this is just like a huge topic. You did give us some advice, Angela. If you are an empath or you resonate with kind of having some of these tendencies yourself, how can you make this more of an advantage for yourself?
Yeah. Before I go to that, I want to just share too, like reflect on what you just said too. And I think what's really important is that I find that empaths, it's hard for us to find, and it's taken me quite a while in my life to find who I truly am, right? What truly makes me happy, what truly makes me shine, because as empaths, we're so focused on everybody else's stuff, it becomes our world instead of really just being really present with ourselves and quiet ourselves long enough to really be like, okay, what do I want? What makes me happy? So being authentic, that word, it's like, that's a really powerful part of, what I help clients do is like, okay, this is not about this person anymore. This is about going inward and looking at what you want. And actually, it's interesting. We're not going to really get into this today, but there's also this connection between empaths and narcissists. And sometimes, especially if empaths often can be with a partner, have a partner who is a narcissist, and that can sometimes almost look like they're almost opposites in a way. So that's another conversation for another day, but that is also a very interesting part of this dynamic. And then again, this idea of what I want to say about taking on other people's stuff, the advice that I would give, kind of a tool I would give somebody who believe that they might be an empath or already know they are, is to be aware. Again, awareness is the first key, and that's what you mentioned earlier. So already having like awareness, either this is the first time you've heard of it and you're like really resonating with it and it's like, oh my gosh, this is totally me. I would say like, great. And then like, it's not only awareness, and then like the self-reflection is like realizing that because you are highly aware and you have this emotional intelligence, that just because you feel something, you sense something, you pick up other emotions, a lot of times we think those things are all ours. So let me just share that in a sense of like an example of like when we're talking about our health, right? Our physical health, is that sometimes we can feel other people's pain even, right? And I've felt this before. I mean, I've told this story a couple of other times, but it's so important for me. It was such a very profound moment in my life when I started to notice how aware I actually was when I was walking down the street one day and all of a sudden my hip really hurt. And I was like, oh, well, I don't have any hip issues. Like, this is weird. And then I look up and sure enough, somebody, walking right in front of me was on crutches and was like, hobbling on their leg and that side of their hip. And I was like, wow, okay. Because I could have just taken that as like, oh, a coincidence, right? Well, I'm kind of one that like doesn't believe in coincidences. There's a connection between us beings that we don't really ever talk about very much. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's often, not acknowledged. And so when we feel something in our bodies, even physically, sometimes it's not always ours. And those, when I use tools like return to sender, and maybe you can't resonate to the physical part of this, but let's say you're the person who ruminates over, conversations you've had with people, you still might have their energy or worried about how you said something in a conversation, right? Oh, I might have said that wrong. Did they take that wrong? Oh my gosh, you're going to replay it over and over in your mind. You might not even be able to sleep because you're thinking about it so much. Those are times when there's tools that I give my clients, like, and we basically play with all these different tools to see what works for them. But like one of them is, I'll just give you this tool. It's like return to sender. Like, this is not mine. This does not need to consume me anymore. So you just say, return to sender with consciousness or love attached, and just allow it to sort of, and you can even see it physically sort of leave your space and leave your bubble around you, so that you don't have to spend any more energy. And you can see how that type of ruminating, right, can just totally suck all of the energy and life out of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question on that, just kind of piggyback with what you said. I'm totally guilty of like having thoughts like this from time to time. So
you're not alone.
Yeah. So coach me on this, and hopefully we'll help some others too if anybody else is feeling the same way. So if you've kind of created that stress, you know, or you're lying in bed being like, oh my God, why did I say that? You know, having those types of thoughts, do you think that it's something that is not yours, or it is something that you created because you tend to worry about what other people think of you? Like, it might not be yours to carry, but you, like, it's kind of like you, I feel like it's something that I own because I created it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a couple things going on there. So I'm going to try to like dissect it a little bit. And
okay.
Yes, I think what you're saying is totally normal. And I think, so one thing I would say is like, if you feel like something you said, like there was, it almost seemed like what you were saying was like an ill intention. Like, did I pick up that right? Like there's sort of like, you're wondering if the intention behind what you said, or.
Yeah, I'm not thinking of a specific example, really,
Okay.
but I'm just thinking if it's like a moment where I feel like I said something wrong, or just kind of that feeling where maybe you wished you worded things differently, so it would have just like maybe come out that like more eloquently, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's several things. I think, you know, you could ruminate in those thoughts, or, you know, like I always say, like getting out of reaction and go into action. So, you know, there's several things you can do with that. You can say, okay, well, what's done is done. Let's like, what would it take for me to just move on and let this go?
Yeah.
Or do I need to have another conversation with this person and be just really clear about what I was trying to say, or share my intention? And even if what I did say came out wrong, or you'd like to figure out some way to reframe it, right? Then there's that opportunity as well. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. So in some cases, you could just try and be like, return to sender. If that doesn't seem to work, you can kind of explore. What was the question you just asked? What would it take for me to let this go?
To like, let this go. Yeah. And what if I wasn't in the wrong here? You know, I think a lot of times when we're empaths, we're always like, everything is right or wrong or good or bad. And this can lead us down like a really kind of a hard place, right? When we think that we've done something wrong, or that we're bad, or the other person has done something wrong or is bad, and I'm the victim. It's like, if we could be more in allowance, I think that's a nice word here, because learning empaths to learn how to be an allowance of themselves and their own mistakes, you know, as learning opportunities, as well as other people's mistakes, right? They got caught off in traffic. You know, you got caught off in traffic. If you're an empath, you might really like, that might really like, so like, really like, just, I don't know, startle you and like really ruin your day, right? And how to be like, okay, I'm having compassion for that person because maybe they were late for a meeting, or maybe they just found out some really horrible news, right? So you have, as an empath, you might feel that empathy, but you also might just feel like, you know, all of their stuff just like, I don't know, flooded onto your energy. So yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I think so. And I think this has been a really great conversation. Is there anything that you want to add before we wrap things up?
Well, there was something we talked about earlier that I wanted to just shed light on, and that's this idea of empaths and taking on other people's stuff in relationship to like children in our formative years. And if we had people in our lives who were anxious people, right? Or we had abuse in the household, or whatever type of abuse that might be, is that as an empath, well, first of all, you mentioned it, right, about addiction and things like that. And just kind of, I wanted to just mention that if you're an empath, you might even have easily taken on, you know, people's energy, and from when you were a child, if, you know, people that you grew up around, right? Mom, dad, aunt, uncle, cousin, or whoever you spent the most time with, right? If that person had a lot of anxiety, or that person was controlling or whatnot, as an empath, you might really take on a lot of that, partly because you're around it, right? And you take other people's emotions in, but also because you are so aware of their way that they function. And you might have, again, that empathy, that more empathy than an average person. So where you almost want to take it on for them. So that's sort of how sometimes people repeat cycles. Maybe it's genetic, but maybe there's more to it than just genetics. And you're actually taking on other people's stuff because you feel for them or you want to make their lives better. And that's going down quite a deep topic, but I just wanted to sort of bring it in for a moment and shed light on it.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us today.
Yeah, it's really something I'm super passionate about, again, because it's so personal and to me, and it's honestly been a game changer for me in my life. And when I was able to actually be clear on what an empath was, that I was one, it has changed the whole way that I live my life, the way that I function. And definitely, again, mindset is the most important. So I just, anyone else who knows this is them, you can work with me, other coaches out there working on the mindset and really learning these tools to how to really use this gift that you have to your advantage instead of, to your detriment, whether it be chronic illness, anxiety, depression. It can be a symptom, and it can be something that kind of follows you for a long time, and there's ways out of it. So I hope this conversation was helpful. Again, it was just basically a broad stroke across this topic, but let's have maybe a follow-up podcast all about this topic, go a little bit deeper, be fun.
Yeah. And before we just officially close things off, Angela, if you are up for it, is there any part of your daily ritual that you feel is like a non-negotiable, like one juicy thing? I know you shared like a lot of tips that people can kind of do around awareness and just kind of like starting with that and shifting your mindset and asking questions. But is there any like little part of your daily routine that you have, that you use, that you find profound when it comes to kind of keeping this in check for you or like helping you feel protected?
Yeah, I love that. I think the most important thing, I always talk to my clients about this, and really what I bring in very early into this kind of the lifestyle changes that we work on is having a strong morning routine, morning rituals that help to prepare you for the day. That's one of the best ways that you can really start to shift your mindset and regulate your nervous system. And so one of the best questions, I mean, I could tell you like so many questions here that I could ask, but I think I'm going to just make one. And again, I just want to preface this with saying that, like, for me, questions are a lot like affirmations, but it's like another level of affirmation, because sometimes people don't resonate with affirmations. Affirmations can feel fake. So for some people, asking questions in a certain way is been more profound, and certainly for my life and the work that I do with my clients. And so the one question that I would invite you to ask would look something like this. If I was truly honoring me today, if I was truly being me today, what would I choose? And that is really important because, again, empaths are really get sucked up in other people's stuff, like I mentioned earlier, right? So that question is going to help you like really just get clear on like, what do I want here? Like, if this was just about me and living my life, like, what would I choose today? What would I be today? So that would be my tool.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And we'll see you next time.
Yes, let's do it again soon. Thank you for your wisdom today, Angela. And for everyone else, we'll see you next time.